Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exposing a devastating jurisdictional trap hiding inside multi-million-dollar international project cancellations. We're looking at the massive, absolutely critical disconnect between boardroom commercial decision-making and the aggressive, real-world mechanisms of cross-border legal enforcement. Let me ask you something. Have you ever assumed that just because you haven't poured a single yard of concrete on an international greenfield project, you can simply walk away legally unscathed, with zero financial consequences? Or maybe you've been in this situation. You've celebrated a hard-fought international arbitration victory, only to watch helplessly as your target's offshore bank guarantees drain your parent company's accounts right back home. Well, corporate executives fall into this exact jurisdictional trap way too often. To really anchor our analysis today, let's imagine a highly representative, real-world scenario. Think of a massive Chinese lithium battery component manufacturer. They just announced a $300 million or roughly 2 billion RMB greenfield facility in a Southeast Asian nation, say Malaysia. Their ultimate goal? To supply global EV giants right in their backyard. So a letter of intent is signed, land is reserved, and millions of dollars in independent bank guarantees are issued to the host country's industrial park. Everything's looking great, right? But then, within just a few months, the macroeconomic landscape completely shatters. Geopolitical tariffs and strict de-risking policies like the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act initiate severe supply chain scrutiny. At the exact same time, local infrastructure costs in the host countries skyrocket, while global product prices collapse due to overcapacity. The project's internal rate of return plunges deep into the red. So, to stop the bleeding, the parent company pulls the plug and issues a public cancellation. Now, here is where things go terribly wrong. Notice the massive disconnect between a highly confident corporate press release and the lethal legal reality awaiting them at the arbitral tribunal. They assume a public announcement citing strategic optimization is going to magically shield their capital. That assumption is catastrophically wrong. The local developer immediately turns around, claims a fundamental breach of contract, and demands astronomical reliance damages based purely on that initial letter of intent. So let's dive into part one, the legal trap. Specifically, commercial risk versus change of circumstances. When a cross-border dispute hits a premier institution like CITAC or SHIAC, that legal trap is fully sprung. Under Chinese commercial arbitration practice, going in and claiming your market win bad is categorized as normal commercial risk. And guess what? That loses instantly. A sophisticated international merchant is expected to anticipate market volatility. Financial hardship just never legally excuses performance. To actually survive, you have to prove an unpredictable, systemic shock that fundamentally destroys the equity of the contract. That is the only way you're allowed to claim a change of circumstances. To really fortify your defense, you've also got to understand force majeure under Article 590 of the PRC Civil Code. This is a rigid standard requiring absolute physical or legal inability to perform. It contrasts beautifully with the elastic fairness of the change of circumstances doctrine. So your best defense is actually a dual-track approach. Use change of circumstances to argue the deal is now fundamentally unfair and economically unviable, while using force majeure as a rigid shield, claiming performance is literally legally impossible due to external shocks. But here is the absolute catch. The critical, rigid statutory precondition you cannot miss. You cannot simply issue a public cancellation notice and walk away. You must first formally demand good faith renegotiations. If you skip this step and just declare the project dead to the press, Chinese arbitrators will strip your right to claim a change of circumstances entirely. Your commercial exit strategy has to perfectly map onto rigid Chinese statutory procedures. If it doesn't, your quick boardroom decision suddenly becomes a multi-million-dollar legal liability. This brings us to Section 2, the financial hemorrhage. Let's talk about offshore bank guarantees. This right here represents the most immediate, visceral threat to your balance sheet. The host developer instantly triggering a demand on your multi-million-dollar independent bank guarantees. You should never, ever forget this mantra during an international dispute. Winning does not equal recovering. A hard-fought legal victory means absolutely nothing if your capital has already been drained. At the end of the day, procedural mechanisms and asset control supersede substantive legal arguments. You see, independent guarantees are highly abstract see-and-pay instruments. If the host country beneficiary submits the right paperwork, the offshore bank pays out instantly, no questions asked. Then, that offshore bank immediately triggers the domestic counterguarantee, sucking the funds directly out of the parent company's accounts back in mainland China. It's a devastatingly efficient mechanism for draining your assets across borders. To stop this financial bleeding, Chinese law offers a singular, exceptionally narrow lifeline. It's called the Independent Guarantee Fraud Exception. But executing this is notoriously difficult. You literally have to prove to a court that the beneficiary is maliciously abusing their rights, despite knowing the contract is legally suspended. You have to show they know they lack the right to payment, maybe because a change of circumstances event fundamentally altered the contract, and yet they are intentionally abusing their rights by demanding the payout anyway. And under this framework, time isn't just money, it's survival. You have exactly 48 hours. The very moment you file a behavioral preservation order, which is basically an urgent stop payment injunction, your arbitration institution transfers the application to a competent Chinese court. That court then has a strict, non-negotiable 48-hour window to review the evidence and issue the order blocking the bank from paying out the guarantee. To execute this flawlessly, you need to employ a dual stop payment strategy. You simply can't rely on stopping the money in just one place. You need to target the overseas branch through local courts while simultaneously securing a domestic injunction from a Chinese court to trap the funds safely in the mainland. This double lock ensures that even if the offshore bank somehow feels compelled to pay, the domestic counter guarantee won't automatically reimburse them from your core assets. All right, let's move to Section 3, the cross-border matrix, enforcing the victory. Let's say you've done everything right. You navigated the legal trap, you stopped the financial hemorrhage, and you actually secured a favorable CITEC or SHIAC ruling terminating the contract without penalty. Well, your final challenge is executing that Chinese arbitral award in the foreign jurisdiction, like Malaysia, using the 1958 New York Convention. The execution pipeline starts aggressively. It begins with an unannounced ex parte application to the local high court to quickly register the award. Once the court issues that order, the game shifts into a highly contested 14-day inter-parties window where the opposing side will absolutely throw everything they have at you to prevent enforcement. You must ruthlessly dismantle their final counterattacks during this window. First, they will definitely claim they weren't properly notified of the arbitration, which is exactly why you must provide flawless DHL service logs. Next, they will try to block enforcement by disguising normal commercial hardship as a violation of the host country's public policy, a defense you have to forcefully reject. And finally, you must aggressively deny any retaliatory claims for lost profits by proving they completely failed to mitigate their own damages once the project was paused. So take a hard look at your own cross-border contracts and your boardroom assumptions, because as we've seen today, the ultimate fate of your mega project and the safety of your balance sheet is decided by rapid enforcement realities and cross-border asset control, not just the blind confidence of a corporate press release. So I leave you with this question to ponder. Is your exit strategy truly legally bulletproof, or are you just waiting for the jurisdictional trap to spring? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.